Ladies and gentlemen, do you want to know why I'm here today? It's not because I want to give you a pep talk or because I want to make you feel good about yourselves. No, I'm here to tell you the truth.
All right, welcome in. Do a little quick sound check to make sure we're good and that the mic is all set up. I always have to do that because I am not against screwing shit up on a colossal basis. So quick sound check. Somebody can let me know that we are good, and I appreciate. Somebody has said they love the member icon. By the way, thank you so much for that. If you want to become a member, by the way, you can join the imp squad for $2.99, and you get the little devil in a little imp thing. I got 3 tiers of membership, by the way, and you can have the little imp thing on there if you're so inclined. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for you to consider. But let's talk about what tonight's got to be in store. One thing I got to tell you is originally on Friday nights at 6 p.m., which is right now, I do kind of a open questions and answers, or whatever case happens to be hottest at the moment. Right now, that case is Idaho 4, Brian Koberger's case. There was, of course, a major document that got released. Judge Hippler made an announcement yesterday, his ruling on the alternative suspects. So I want to spend tonight about 30 minutes talking about that, either going over it again if you haven't seen it. By the way, out of curiosity, maybe put a 1 in the I got 2 major things tonight. I've got the Idaho 4 response by Judge Hippler on alternative suspects. Put a 1 in the chat if you've already seen my long form video. So if you think you've already heard everything there is to hear about Judge Hippler's response, put a 1. A 2 if you haven't and you're kind of curious to get into a deep dive. So a quick poll would be great. 1, if you've heard all about Hippler's response, been there, done that, you've seen my long form video or something to that effect. 2, if you haven't heard about it. And if I don't get any responses soon, I'll move on to what the next thing is, because we're not getting a lot. So we got a 1, we got a 2, we got a 1, got a 2, 50-50. All right, perfect. That's given me an idea that we probably should spend some time on it. Any more votes on that, by the way? A 12. Shit. Ange, I don't know how to do with 12. What is a 12? It sounds like you probably have heard and haven't heard. So good enough. By the way, I was curious. Also, have you seen the new? It's new to me. A couple of days ago, there was a text messaging between Steve Gonsalves and Brett Norton that supposedly is now online, showing a bunch of private conversation between Steve Gonsalves. I don't know if it's new. It's new to me. It's about a 10-minute video that shows supposed conversation between Steve Gonsalves and text messages with another individual. Now it's typed, it's not screenshots. It's basically, what I understand is Brett Norton, who has a reputation for digging into and getting information, was looking into getting information from Steve Gonsalves for a author of books, a individual, Heidi Bloom, no relations to Howard Bloom, for the New Yorker, and basically had gotten a conversation going with Steve Gonsalves allegedly, and has text messages with Steve Gonsalves talking about the case. And usually I don't do this. Like, I wouldn't do a long form video about those text messages, but I've got it recorded. By the way, when I saw the video, the first thing I did is I went out and downloaded a copy to my computer so that it wouldn't go away, because this is the kind of shit that's going to get scrubbed off the internet quickly. So if you haven't seen it, and at least a couple people have said they have not seen it, we're going to cover those text messages allegedly from Steve Gonsalves. And I cannot say this any more clearly. It is allegedly. However, I will tell you it has a massive ring of truth to it, and it tells us a lot about the case if it is true. So I will caveat the shit out of that when we get to it again. But let's talk first about, and happy Friday, by the way. Yes, thank you. Oh, one more announcement before we get too deep. On Friday nights after this live at about 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time in about 55 minutes, I shut this feed down and I open up my Devil's Advocates Backstage account. It's a completely different account. In fact, let me put that on the screen for you. Don't forget the After Dark party, adults only on Discord. There's the channel. Unfortunately, it's not really a link. You would have to type that in, or I can actually find a link later at the end of the show if you remind me, and I'll paste the link into the chat room. But if you want to join us in the backstage party after we get done with this chat, I have a few drinks on this show, and then by the time we get to the After Dark party, I'm a little loosened up. Birdie Bombshell, for those of you who are here from the Hive, was going to go live with me tonight. He came up with a last minute, and I totally get it. I'm not going to tell you about his personal business. He had a last minute offer. I get relegated to the sorry, I got a better offer for tonight. That shit hasn't happened since high school. Anyways, somebody got a better offer for the night, so I guess I'm in second position again. But again, no problem with Birdie. Love Birdie, and I have no problems with his excuse. His excuse was absolutely 100% legit. He should go do that instead of this. So just like in high school, if you have a better offer, go take that instead. Anyways, so Birdie's not going to be on my After Dark show. We may get visited by Pete Altieri from Murder Metal Mayhem. He originally said earlier in the night when we went live, right, he went to Summerfest. Thank you, Christina. I wasn't going to comment about that. But anyways, yes. So there it is. He probably said that all about on his thing. I just wasn't sure. But anyways, and I'm not going to get into any more details than that. The Discord channel should be scrolling across the bottom. It's got the address right there. HTTPS discord.gg73pg62nk2t. I will try to paste that or a similar link, because unfortunately with Discord you can have a temporary link and you can have a permanent link, and every time you generate the permanent link it's different. So if I post the link in later, it may not be the same one you're seeing on the screen, but that one should get you there. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Hippler's reaction. Look, my wife took care of it. Fantastic. So yeah, I wanted to go live with Birdie tonight on the backstage account. I didn't finish that thought. We're going to finish that thought about the After Dark party, and then we're going to get right into tonight's meat, because I want to spend about probably now 20 minutes on Hippler's response to Ann Taylor and what it all means, and then 20 minutes on Steve Gonzalez's text messages and what it might mean. So again, Birdie's not going to be here at the After Dark show, but we are still going to do the After Dark show. It's where we have a few drinks. It's 18 and older. You have to be 18 and older to see the feed on YouTube, on the Backstage account. That is also right there in the scrolling text at Devil's Advocates Backstage. It's a separate YouTube account that's not monetized, and we can't get in trouble, because if I were to do too much drinking and too much swearing and too much of the inappropriate adult shit that we talk about in the After Dark party, I would probably get demonetized. So let's try not to do that. And then my wife, the she-devil, is in the house. So that's Rhonda. She's in there. She doesn't wear her Devil's Advocates 2 hat. She wears her Rhonda hat, and that's okay with me. So anyways, let's get into it. Now I'm going to pull up on screen, for those of you who may not have seen it, this is the response from Hippler. I'm trying to get it blown up for you a little bit. This is filed 6/26/2025. Stephen Hippler. We're going to talk about this for a little bit, just in case you missed my long form. By the way, I ranted for quite a while on this, and I almost blew a gasket. My wife's like, you are going to have an aneurysm. Like, you are literally going to have a stroke with as spun up as you get. Like, she's in the other room and she hears me like screaming at the camera. I get excited. I get passionate. I feel like it's controlled. It's just me. I'm a passionate person. I put a lot into my emotions, and I wear them on my sleeve. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Hopefully it doesn't lead to an aneurysm. I've been dealing with it my whole life. But let's talk about what happened. At the end of the day, let me see if I can scroll this. At the end of the day, the confusion comes is, so Ann Taylor had basically proposed that she has 4, we didn't actually know the number, I don't think, until recently, 4 alternative suspects that could have potentially done the murders of the Idaho 4. And therefore, she wants to be able to submit the possibility that there were alternative perpetrators. Stephen Hippler's position has essentially been from day one, I'm not going to let you just bring somebody's name into the courtroom as an alternative suspect unless you have really good proof. Show me your proof and I will consider it. Ann Taylor showed Stephen Hippler her proof And his response is here on the screen. It essentially, to summarize what Stephen Hippler said, is your proof is not good enough. I'm not going to allow you to drag anybody's name into the mud in the courtroom because your proof is not good enough. Your motion to bring in alternative suspects has been denied. Now, here's the good news, the silver lining. So let's just go ahead and start diving into this a little bit. Again, if you want to watch a more passionate, because the more times I do it, I guess maybe the less passion I put into it. I was yelling and shouting about some of the shit in this document. Maybe we'll do it again if it makes me that angry. Some of this stuff still makes me that angry. But anyways, the state obviously has objected to Ann Taylor providing any suggestion that alternative suspects are involved. In fact, Stephen Hippler, in my opinion, completely biased view, is saying bringing up the idea that somebody else could have done it besides Brian Kohberger is only going to confuse the jury. That pisses me. I'm already getting mad. I'm already starting to blow that gasket right now. Stephen Hippler. All right. I thought somebody just told me to stop yelling. I'm here for the yelling. Thank God, because I'm getting spun up. Stephen Hippler's attitude is, if you talk about somebody else could have done it, it's only going to confuse the jury. Well, screw you, but isn't that the whole point of reasonable doubt? Is it possible somebody else did this? If it's possible somebody did this, then it should confuse the jury, because it isn't, as my thumbnail said in the long form video, Stephen Hippler's attitude is, Kohberger is the only one who's allowed to be guilty. No one else is allowed to be guilty. If you bring up anybody else's name other than Kohberger, you're only confusing the jury, because the only person on trial and the only person guilty for this is Brian Kohberger. And so don't confuse the jury with this idea that somebody else could have done it, because the only person who's guilty is Brian Kohberger. How the fuck is that guy in charge of this trial? Having said that, let me relax, because there's some legal basis for what he says. And I'll explain what the legal basis is. It is irresponsible to bring someone's name into the courtroom and slander somebody in courtroom. Now, to clarify, the media and the judge and the prosecution has no problem ruining Brian Kohberger's life by telling everyone in America that he is a mass murderer and a psychopathic killer who killed women because he hates women. That's okay to ruin his life and completely destroy his life forever by the slanderous shit that some people will never be able to get out of their head. That's okay. But Hippler is not willing to tolerate somebody else's innocent name getting run through the mud. Do we not remember that in this country, you are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law? So Hippler telling us that it's okay to run Kohberger's name through the mud and make him be guilty before he even has his first day in trial is perfectly acceptable. But I will not tolerate innocent people having their name put through the mud. Well, for fuck's sake, pardon my French, I'm a little angry. I'll try to drop the F-bombs. For Pete's sake, Brian Kohberger should be presumed innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. And a judge should not be taking up the side of the prosecution and telling the defense, your guy's guilty. The judge is supposed to impartially listen to the defense, listen to the prosecution, make sure that they're both playing by the fair rules, and let the jury of his peers decide. But Hippler seems to already have decided who's guilty in this case. And again, that's why the thumbnail is called, according to Hippler, Kohberger is the only one allowed to be guilty in this case, nobody else. Having said that, here's the silver lining right here. And so let me go back up. The state objects to the presentation of this evidence at trial, arguing that it fails to satisfy the standards under State versus Meister. We'll put the State versus Meister case on hold. We're not going to break in what that is exactly. But the point being is the state, the prosecution, objects to Ann Taylor bringing in alternative suspects, and they cited a case, State versus Meister, which according to what I've been told had Bill Thompson involved in it and Stephen Hippler at some point involved in it. So I'm not sure about that shit. I haven't looked into all the details of the State versus Meister, only superficially. But anyways, here's the silver lining about the idea that Hippler could be just doing his job. The defendant conceded. Now, the defendant is Brian Kohberger. Yes, he's being represented by Ann Taylor, but the defendant, and that's why we're going to use the male pronoun when it says he did this, the defendant is Brian Kohberger. His representative is female. So it gets a little confusing. But the defendant conceded at oral argument that at this point, Brian Kohberger's proffer, that is not sufficient to pursue an alternative perpetrator theory at the outset of the trial, but requests latitude and cross-examination of the state's witnesses to try to establish additional evidence to satisfy the Meister standard. What does that mean? Let's run, as I say, let's run that through the universal translator. What it means is Ann Taylor has conceded that based on Hippler's ruling of Meister's case, that they don't have enough information. This is my interpretation. They don't have enough information to say something like, we believe Jack Showalter did it, or could, sorry, not did it. We believe Jack Showalter could have done it. We believe Jack DeCoeur could have done it. We believe Emma Bailey could have done it. It doesn't rise to the level of being able to put someone's name in court and say, we think the alternate person who could have done this is Bob, Sarah, whatever. You can't do that. And they have conceded, the defendant, Brian Kohberger and his team has conceded, there's not sufficient enough evidence to name names and say, here's the person we think did it. By the way, it's not their effing job. It's not the defense's job to tell you who did it. They don't need to do the police department's work. They don't need to do law enforcement's work. They don't need to do the FBI's work. They don't need to tell you who committed the crime. That's not how this freaking works. Anybody who has this wrong in this country needs to figure this shit out. It is not the defense's job to say, well, if it's not Brian Kohberger, then who is it? And if you can't tell us who it is, then your guy's guilty. That's not how that shit works. The question is, did Brian Kohberger do it or not? Now, Hippler's stance is, Brian Kohberger is the only one on trial. I'm not going to allow you to put anyone else on trial. So it's just a matter of, did your guy do it or not? But at the end of the day, in order to present reasonable doubt in a jury's mind, you have to be able to say to a reasonable juror, does Brian Kohberger's motive as presented, again, motive is not necessary in a murder case, by the way, but in order for a jury to look at it, the question is, does somebody else have better motive and opportunity than my guy? If so, then how can we say for definitively that my guy is the only guy? And part of their whole thing to convict Brian Kohberger is, one, he had the motive. He had the, again, you don't have to prove motive. He had the opportunity. There has to be most juries want a story. Most juries want to understand, why did somebody do something? So while motive is not necessary, it is important to a jury to understand why. So Hippler's basic attitude is, some guy who's an incel and has a hard time getting laid decided that he didn't like pretty women because he can't have pretty women. So decided to randomly go over to a college town and just kill 4 women in a house of 6, leave a couple of the women behind that were also pretty and just leave them behind. But this was the only choice he had because he's angry at pretty women because he can't have pretty women. That apparently to Judge Hippler makes complete sense as a motive. And any other alternative motive, like potentially drug dealers that live not nearby, that's not a good motive. Potentially ex-boyfriend who might have been upset about the relationship ending, that's not a good motive. In Hippler's words, literally, those are no better motives that move the ball away from Brian Kohberger. I don't know what reality Stephen Hippler lives in, but the jealous ex-boyfriend or a jilted ex-boyfriend is a hell of a lot better motive, in my opinion, than a guy who can't get laid and decided he needed to kill 4 to 6 women in a house. And again, I say women all the time. I'm making a mistake. Ethan Chapin, was a male in the house. So 3 women and a male were killed in a house full of women. Ethan wasn't even supposed to be there that night. He was staying the night with his girlfriend, Xana. So one can argue that the person didn't expect Ethan Chapin to be there. But anyways, the point being is Hippler has denied Ann Taylor bringing in alternative suspects. Now, here's the great part. Here's something we didn't know before, I think. Let me see if I can scroll down to it, because I cover this in detail in my long form video. But let's get into it. I'm trying to look at the time to make sure we're on. And by the way, I'm so sorry, by the way. Kimberly and I'm one of my moderators. We're trying to figure out, and Cheryl's one of my moderators. We're trying to figure out how to pin comments in here so I can get to people and not miss it. Because when I'm on a rant, all my eyes are on the document and ranting, and I'm missing my conversation. I will come back to the conversation at the night. So please keep your best questions, and my moderators, maybe do your best to keep the best questions in mind, and we'll try to figure this shit out as we go. But anyways, here's one of the things I pointed out in the document. As you can see, I skipped through a whole bunch of shit. All this yellow stuff I cover in my long form video, but we're going to jump down tonight for here. The evidence the defendant has offered purporting the establishment of 4 individuals as alternative perpetrators abjectly fails to meet the Meister standard. Now, this is what's interesting. I don't think before we had the number that Ann Taylor has presented the possibility of 4 4 alternative perpetrators, 3 of which lived within walking distance of the house. Now, I know some names right off the top of my head that lives within walking distance. And I'm going to tie in, by the way, if we have time to get to it, Steve Gonzalez alleged text messages talking about one of those individuals who was a suspect in the crime who lived within walking distance of the house. So we're going to talk about that when we get to it. But let's go here. Yeah, I need a cuss jar. You know what? I would be able to completely 100% retire if every time I say the F-bomb, especially on the After Dark party, I got 25 cents. I could retire. But anyways, actually, I'm doing pretty good, aren't I? I'm not actually dropping the F-bomb a whole lot. So the defendant has 4 alternative suspects that they brought to Stephen Hippler, of which he said all 4 of them do not warrant you bringing their ass name into the courtroom. I can kind of get that, Hippler. I can kind of go with Hippler. Don't mention their names in court and start bringing in and slandering people's names in court, because all 4 of these people you don't have enough evidence on right now. And again, the silver lining is Judge Hippler said, and they conceded, you're right, Your Honor. We don't have enough evidence quite yet. We are still working on it, which is why Ann Taylor says we need more time. Some of these leads have not been fully developed. We're getting some of these leads early right now. We need to explore them further. Hippler said, screw you. We're going ahead with the trial right now. And the only person, by the way, who's allowed to be guilty is Brian Koberger. So I don't want to hear about your alternative suspects. And if you're not ready, then you're not ready. But the silver lining is Hippler said, you know what? You're allowed, because he has no choice, this is the law, you're allowed to cross-examine police officers on the stand and the FBI if they take the stand. You're allowed to cross-examine. And if during your cross-exam, you can get them to admit that they ruled out somebody too early, only if you can get them to admit they made a mistake in ruling out somebody or verifying somebody's alibi or overlooking somebody or not going down a lead, if you can do that, then we will sidebar. We will sidebar. You will not say anybody's name in front of a jury. We will sidebar and you will tell me, okay, Your Honor, the FBI or the law enforcement just admitted they didn't follow up on leads properly. I submit it could have been Billy Bob Smith, right? And then the judge will be like, okay, I will allow you to say that name in front of the jury. But until that's, he says, do not say anybody's name in front of the jury. Now, I already have ideas whose name's going to come in front of the jury. I can, but again, the silver line, the summary is Hippler said, don't mention anyone's name in front of that jury, because that's going to be a problem. And I'll essentially he's going to threaten them with fines and contempt of court and all that shit if they bring up somebody's name, like a Jack DeCour or a Jack Showalter or an Emma Bailey. If you mention those kind of names, that's going to be problems. But if you can trip up law enforcement or FBI on the stand to admit that they didn't do their due diligence or ruled somebody out too early, then maybe I'll allow you. And again, Ann Taylor is allowed to have investigators continuing to work on this case right now so that they can continue to develop. So all that Ann Taylor has conceded is at this moment, as we get ready to go to trial, which I've told you multiple times, we are not ready to go to trial. But if you force me to go to trial like you are, because Stephen Hippler said we're not doing a continuance, we're not postponing this trial at all, we are going to trial, you better be ready, period. And she's like, we're not ready, but we're still working on it. And if you give me a little latitude, was what she asked, if you give me a little latitude, I want to cross-examine police officers, go down the rabbit hole that they didn't vet people properly, that they ruled out people by their alibi too quickly, which is the same thing Steve Gonzalez said early in this investigation, that they ruled out people too quickly. So he's going to allow that because it's the freaking law. Hippler has to allow cross-examination. So he reluctantly conceded, and Taylor's allowed to try to trip up law enforcement, admit that maybe they ruled people out too quickly, and if she does it cleverly enough, maybe she can bring in alternative suspects. Now, let's go to talk a little bit about what those 4 people are. I thought this was super interesting. I'm trying to see if I can find it off the top of my head. Okay, yes, right here. Does it start there? It seems like that's a continuation of this sentence. Okay. 3, here we go. 3 of the individuals, I'm trying to highlight for you and I'm having a hard time highlighting, so screw it. I mean, whatever. Follow my mouse if you can see that little tiny mouse there. 3 of the individuals were each socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with one or more of the victims at social events in the hours prior. Now, I'm telling you, top of my list has always been to question Jack DeCour. We know he interacted with the girls hours before the events. Jack Showalter, we know he interacted with the girls within hours of the events. So 3 of the individuals were socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with the victims at social events like the bar at the Corner Club that night. I've said in other videos, I believe 100% whatever happened that night stems at the Corner Club bar. That Corner Club bar is the key to this case, in my opinion. Not some random guy in Pullman who decided to get a raging hard on that night and go kill 4 women for fucking no reason whatsoever. Pardon my French. Maybe I need to cut back on the sauce. The point being is that is not probably what happened. To me, what's more likely to happen is something that happened at the Corner Club that night was the triggering event. That's my gut. That's what I'm telling you, I think. But I'm keeping my eyes open. And if it turns out that Brian Kohberger did it, and that makes more sense, and I see the evidence, I'm going to the trial. By the way, I plan on being in the trial every single day of this court thing and reporting to you from the courthouse every single day. If it turns out Brian Kohberger did it, I'll be the first to say, well, fuck, I was wrong. Pardon my French. I said I was going to drop the F-bombs. Well, shit. Brian Kohberger might have been guilty. I guess we got that wrong, and it's okay. You know what? And I won't be ashamed for presuming that Brian Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty, because that's what he's supposed to have, is that presumption. All right, let's continue on. 3 of the 4 individuals that Ann Taylor brought forward are guys or victims. We don't know if it's guys. Are people who are connected to the girls and to the house and interacted with them in the hours prior to the homicide. That tells us a lot. They also lived, listen to this, they also lived within walking distance of the crime scene and were familiar with the layout of the victim's home from prior social events. So we know now that Ann Taylor's 3 alternative suspects that could have done this were people who knew the girls, knew the house, had been in the house, know the layout of the house, and interacted with the girls that night sometime before the murders, probably at the Corner Club. That really, really supports my ongoing number 1 theory. If you haven't seen, I've got a video called like 22 of my theories and how I have ranked them from 22 down to number 1. My number 1 theory being that probably the number 1 suspect in Ann Taylor's list as well. All right, so. And again, let's keep in mind, if somebody knew the house, if that house was dark when the killer went in, and if Brian Kohberger had never been into the house before, if Brian Kohberger can go into a house he's never been in before, and like a dumbass, sees a million cars outside and decides that he's going to go ahead and go through with it anyways. Now, again, if he's targeting one girl, why the hell would you go in? Why? Any serial killer... If you watch serial killers, the Ted Bundys and the Gacy's and whatever, they target individuals. They single them out. They look for opportunities to get them alone. What they don't go into is a party house and go kill their intended victim in the middle of a house full of people and then leave victims behind. To me, and I'm sorry, I'm one of the only people that seems to think this, none of that shit makes sense. But to Hippler, it makes complete sense. He's a budding serial killer who picked a target that happened to be in a house full of people with a whole bunch of cars outside and decided to go in and do it anyways, targeting one person. Maddie was his target. Everybody else was just an accident. This is the most asinine theory I've ever seen. Now, again, at the end of the day, could it possibly be true? Yes. Stranger shit has happened. But I'm still thinking Hippler's attitude that nothing else makes more sense than that is the most asinine thing that I've seen. All right, let's continue. While perhaps this evidence that Ann Taylor has offered that 3 individuals knew the girls, had been in the house and interacted with them earlier that night, while perhaps this evidence could suggest an opportunity to commit the crime, which no doubt is an opportunity that's shared by dozens of others in the victim's social circles, there is no compelling evidence that any of them had a motive to kill the victims, much less physically harm them, or a means to do so. This shit pisses me off as well. You don't have to have a motive. Technically, the prosecution doesn't have to have a motive to prove why Brian Kohberger did what he did if he did it. But suddenly, all of a sudden, Hippler says, well, there's no motive for anybody else to have killed Kaylee Gonzalez. Not even a jilted ex-boyfriend who's losing her and may have decided that if nobody can, if I can't have her, nobody can. That makes no sense to Stephen Hippler. In any right mind, nobody had a motive at all. No logical motive of somebody like an ex-boyfriend could outdo the guy who can't get laid next door. Further, there is no evidence connecting them to the crime scene. And again, let me just freaking shout from the rooftops. I'm running out of time to cover this document because I want to leave time for Steve Gonzalez's text messages. If, as Hippler has just admitted to us, all 3 of these people related to the women had been in and not just the women, Ethan Chapin, let's not forget that. All three of the alternate suspects of the three of the four, I should say, the three of the four had been in the house before. They knew the girls before. They were in the girls' social circle. They had interacted with the girls that night. Kiss my ass if you tell me that their DNA is not in the house. If those people have been in the house, their DNA is in the house. Do you not remember what I've said before? We slough 35 to 40,000 skin cells every minute off of our body. We are constantly shedding DNA. So for Hippler to say there's no DNA linking any of those other people to the crime scene, you can kiss my ass. Because if they had been in the house like you just said they were, and they were in the girls' social circle, and they were familiar with the layout of the house because they'd been there, their freaking DNA is in the house. So again, kiss my ass that their DNA is not in the house. It is absolutely in the house. So I guarantee you, out of three out of the four suspects that Ann Taylor has presented as potential alternative suspects all have their DNA in the house. Hippler is telling you they do not. There's no evidence of their DNA in the house. You know why there's no evidence of their DNA in the house? Because law enforcement didn't look for anybody else than Brian Kohberger. That's why they haven't seen it. Because I guarantee you Jack DeCour's DNA is in that house. I guarantee you Jack DeCour's DNA is in that house. But they're acting like no DNA has been searched tied to this scene other than Brian Kohberger's, because they stopped looking at anybody other than Brian Kohberger. Notably, lab testing has excluded their DNA from samples taken from the crime scene and the victims. Probably talking about the DNA under the fingernails, for example, of one of the victims that didn't come up to be Brian Kohberger's, so they just ignored it. All right, the fourth individual, let's talk about that, and I think we're going to have to end there so we have time to talk about Steve Gonzalez's text messages and what it tells us, if it's true. So I'm wrapping up. Again, I've got a long-form video on this called something to the effect, I think the thumbnail is Kohberger is the only one who's allowed to be guilty. It's got a picture of Stephen Hippler doing his thing. Kohberger's the only one allowed to be guilty, period. We're not allowed to. Don't confuse the jury with any idea that somebody else other than Brian Kohberger did it, because the only thing that makes sense is a guy who can't get laid deciding he has to kill women, because it's the only option you have left if you get rebuffed by a female, is to kill a bunch of them and one of their boyfriends. The fourth individual, I will believe, is somebody who was stalking Kaylee Gonzalez, or at least she believed that he was stalking Kaylee Gonzalez. The fourth individual did not know the victims, but had passing connection to one of them. I believe that's Kaylee Gonzalez without question. While noticing her shopping at a store approximately 5 weeks prior to the homicide, he followed her briefly out the exit of the store while considering approaching her to talk. He turned away before speaking to her. The event was captured on a surveillance camera. This individual subsequently cooperated with law enforcement, providing his phone number. That should rule him out right now. They got his phone number, so now his alibi is good. He's got his phone number and a DNA sample, and because his DNA wasn't found in the house. By the way, they stopped looking for DNA in the house once they had Brian Kohberger's, so no fucking shit you did. No shit you didn't find this guy's DNA in the house. You didn't look. You didn't look. But because his DNA was never found at the scene, as with the other alleged alternative perpetrators, lab reports excluded his DNA from samples taken from the crime scene, like the sample from the button sheath didn't match that guy, so he's ruled out. And the victims there, and there's no evidence connecting him to the crime scene. So again, Kaylee Gonzalez, it is well reported, believed that she had a stalker. Guess what? Coincidentally, around the same time she broke up her relationship with long-term boyfriend, 5 or 6 year relationship with Jack DeCour, she started saying somebody was stalking her. She claimed that this guy might have been stalking her. She called the police. The incident is well recorded. The police came out and investigated. This is that fourth individual that Ann Taylor's list is just simply suggesting. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't do it, but it's something that the jury should think about. Stephen Hippler said, no, they shouldn't think about it. That will only confuse the jury. That somebody might have been obsessed with Kaylee and followed her ass out of a car and scared her so bad she had to call the police. That makes no fucking sense whatsoever. It has no material relevance. I don't want you bringing that up because it doesn't move the bar away from the guy who can't get laid in Pullman. That's the only thing that makes more sense, according to Stephen Hippler. I said I wasn't going to get us spun up. I think I got us spun up as I did the first time. All right, let's move on to whether or not you guys have seen this other video. Have you seen this video here? Steve Gonzalez's solo leaked messages, and It All Flows by Sonia Lee, I think it is. And I feel like I'm hearing sound. Am I playing the video? I think I am playing the video. I don't want to play the video yet. Let's pause. All right. So this video here, allegedly, so I know this is abrupt. I just ended like right off the cuff. I just ended. Bam, we're done talking about Stephen Hippler. Again, I did a full-length video. I recommend you watch it if you haven't done so, breaking down Stephen Hippler's attitude, which is no one's allowed to be guilty except for Brian Koberger, rejecting the alternative suspects of Van Taylor. I do a longer rant than I did tonight. I did it in 25 minutes. I think I did it in an hour and 40 minutes maybe on that video. So I do go into it quite a bit more in depth, and maybe even with more passion. Okay, before I get into this video of Steve Gonzalez's solo leaked messages and how it all flows, how many people have seen this? Give me a 1 if you've seen this already. Give me a 2 if you haven't. Now, you may not have seen this particular video. There's probably multiple copies of this video. It's text messages allegedly from Steve Gonzalez to an individual named Brat Norton, talking about the crime scene. Brat Norton was supposedly texting with Steve Gonzalez, trying to get information. They were having a conversation about what he knows. 1, if you've seen it before. 2, if you have not. How exciting is this? How exciting is this? Lots of 2s. All right. This is about a 10-minute audio. I'm going to try to take us out to the end of the hour with this. All right. So I'm going to roll this while I talk. So this is one side of the conversation. Brat Norton's conversation has been removed, and all that you're going to see here is somebody retyping. It's not going to be somebody's screenshot. It's somebody who's gotten this download of the conversation, Melissa, right here. All right, let's stop this video. Boom. So this is allegedly allegedly, let's stop for a moment. Allegedly text messages from Steve Gonzalez to Brat Norton, who allegedly, from what I understand, is trying to hide the fact that Brat Norton is asking Steve about the case in a private conversation, and and I think it happened maybe on Facebook Messenger, getting Steve Gonzalez involved in talking about the case, and was trying to feed this to a reporter for the New Yorker. So that's allegedly the story. And normally I wouldn't run with this. But again, it's Friday night, and who gives a shit? We're going to talk about it. I'm going to do it with a bunch of caveats. None of what you're about to see may be true. Absolutely none may be true. But I'm going to show you why I think it has a ring of truth to it. So Steve Gonzalez, if this is the case, if it's Steve Gonzalez, says the SUV was there hours before, but at least it matches up with the white car being seen at the scene at 4:04 a.m. That's not important. Let's move on to this. We've talked with 2 grand jury members. This is Steve, again, allegedly, this is Steve Gonzalez talking to somebody privately. And again, I would not usually give somebody's private text message information. This is out there on the internet. Other people have leaked it. I'm only reporting on what's out there in the ether already. If I had Steve Gonzalez's private messages, I wouldn't be sharing Steve Gonzalez's private messages no matter what, because I believe in people's privacy. But this shit's out on the ether and already floating. So if other people can talk about it, I've got to talk about it. And Bloom used these text messages in his textbook. Right. So this has got some credence. I think it's legit, but let's just break through it. It tells us a lot, in my opinion. We've talked with 2 grand jury members that helped calm the nerves a lot. So Steve Gonzalez somehow, and he tells you later how it happened, that I think an author helped get them in touch. I think it was James Patterson. He says Peterson. I think it's James Patterson. His new book's coming out. By the way, shameless plug for my book series. I've got book series. I review books on the case. I'm finishing up Howard Bloom's When the Night Comes Falling, hit piece on Brian Koberger. We're going to start James Patterson's book series coming up. That's all on my channel if you want to watch me break down chapter by chapter and see that. But anyway, so Steve Gonzalez allegedly says here, we've talked to 2 grand jury members, and that helped ease their concerns a lot. Supposedly the author, one of the authors of the books, got him in touch with some of the grand jurors on the case. And again, a grand jury, by the way, their job is not to determine guilt or innocence. Their job is to decide whether or not the case has enough merits to proceed. At some point in this video, which gives it a ring of truth, at some point in this video, the person putting the video together questions why the defense wasn't available or wasn't present at the grand jury testimony. They never are in general. Grand juries are convened in private. The defense doesn't even show up. The defense doesn't get to see any of the shit. All it is the prosecution presenting their side, which, by the way, is important when we get into this, because when Steve Gonzalez says, oh, I'm really encouraged, the grand jury sees a reason to go after Brian Koberger, they must have been convinced. Yes, that's without the presence of defense counsel. Defense isn't there. They are seeing a one-sided view. A grand jury only sees the prosecution's case. They don't get to hear shit from the defense. So yes, of course, the grand jury agreed after hearing one side of the argument, and only one side, that there was enough grounds to proceed with Brian Koberger. All right, it's all on camera. From what I've been told, his car. So Steve Gonzalez believes Brian Koberger's car is seen at the scene. It's all on camera. There's no question it's Brian Koberger where they have his camera. And Murphy is freaking out, him taking off at 4:21. Okay. So he's got the dog Murphy freaks out for, according to Steve Gonzalez, for about 10 minutes during the entire killings. So the window happens around 10 minutes. Steve Gonzalez talks at some point about Murphy freaking out for a solid 10 minutes and quits barking at 4:21 when the car speeds away from the scene. The Patterson's book title is, I think, One Night in Idaho, or is that the name of the documentary that's coming out that Patterson is also associated with? I don't know. I've already pre-purchased his book. I'll try to get that for you at the end of the night. All right, let's continue on. We're never going to get through this if I don't speed it up. I have to keep the witnesses. Now, this is big. I have to keep the witness under wraps. The FBI warned me they don't play games with protected informants. Now, Steve Gonzalez, if this is legitimate, Steve Gonzalez is admitting he knows there's a protected informant in the case, and he can't leak it because they've already been warned by the FBI. We don't fuck around if you leak our confidential informant. I have reason to believe that their confidential informant is Molly McMichael. Molly McMichael, the DoorDash driver who they've been keeping a secret from the public until recently when internet sleuths broke that shit, because thank God for internet sleuths. You guys are badasses out there. Somebody broke the Molly McMichael's body cam footages where she talks about, yeah, I got to go testify against Brian Koberger. I saw him that night. I parked right next to him. We now, I think, know with a reasonable doubt who the confidential informant is, the protected informant that Steve Gonzalez is trying to protect and not tell us about. That's, I believe, my gut tells me. Can't prove it. We also can't prove that there's Steve Gonzalez's text messages. But if it is Steve Gonzalez, I believe the confidential informant that they're hiding, that everyone's been hiding, is Molly McMichaels. I always screw it up for some reason. Here we go. Some other author wanted to work with us. Peterson, I think. I think he's talking about, as the author will point out on the screen, does he mean James Patterson? Yes, I believe he means James Patterson. James Patterson's book's coming out here in a couple weeks. And so James Patterson, I believe, reached out to Steve Gonzalez. All of this tracks. The Patterson true crime guy helped connect us with a grand jury member. So now we know how it is Steve Gonzalez found out who the grand jury members were and talked to the grand jury members, because James Patterson, in research for his new book coming out to hit piece Brian Koberger, reached out to Gonzalez's, because Patterson's writing a book about the Idaho case. Who does he want in that book? He wants Steve Gonzalez in there. He wants the Gonzalez family. Kaylee Gonzalez is an enormous part of this book. He needs their story. So Patterson reached out to Steve Gonzalez and says, hey, look, I've managed to make contact on people who were on the grand jury. I can tell you what the grand jury was thinking when they saw the case. That's huge shit if it's true. Patterson reached out to, and this is again allegedly, reached out to Steve Gonzalez and said, I know who some of the grand jurors are, and I can give you some inside information, wink, wink, nod, nod, on how this case is proceeding and what the grand jury saw and what they thought. Wait till you see that shit if you haven't seen it. We had access to a few cameras, and it's why we did the interviews. So Steve Gonzalez has seen some stuff that the public hasn't seen. Why? Because we've already been told by the latest leak of Dateline NBC that someone has been leaking information to the public, and Steve Gonzalez has been running his mouth about shit that he shouldn't, because they've seen stuff that the public has not seen. And that's under investigation, supposedly. Although Hippler seems to be doing a half-assed job of investigating and holding anybody to the fire for the leaked information coming out of the prosecution and law enforcement side. That's a whole nother side tangent. Stephen Hippler supposedly blew a gasket when said, who's been leaking information in this case to law enforcement? Steve Gonzalez, I think, is part of that circle. Somebody's leaking information to Steve Gonzalez. Steve Gonzalez is going on every show, like the Drunk Turkey Show and all that shit, and running his mouth about, wait till you find out what I know. I know everything about this case. I've got an insider telling me exactly what happened in that case. I know Brian Koberger was there. I've been told I have an eyewitness, Molly, who saw Brian Koberger walk into the house. So I know exactly what happened. Officer Fry would just say, this is big. Now, again, we're missing what was said, because this is one half of the conversation. So this other individual, Brat Norton, is writing supposedly to Steve Gonzalez. We're not seeing what he did, that part of the conversation, or Brat. I don't know if it's a male or a female. Brat, I think, maybe a female. Anyways, that conversation has been removed. So we don't know exactly what prompted it. But here's what he says. Steve Gonzalez, Chief Fry, would just say that both jacks have been cleared. We don't get that information anymore. Both Jacks, Jack DeCour, Jack Showalter. These are two individuals who are prominent in this case. They're at the Corner Club that night. All that Steve says is, we were told by the chief that the Jacks were cleared, and that's all we've heard about it. So right there, that should tell you. How far did they go, and how far did Steve get to go? Because they stopped talking to him. If this is true, they stopped talking to him about Jack DeCour's alibi or Jack Showalter's alibi. We don't get any information about that anymore. So that's important to know, if it's true. Jack DeCour, I believe, is what he's saying. Jack DeCour did a lie detector and gave his DNA. That was part of his alibi. He did a lie detector test and came out clean, so that cleared him, and he gave his DNA, and they said, I laugh out loud when I say this, Jack DeCour's DNA wasn't at the crime scene. Screw you. Jack DeCour's DNA is at that crime scene. Jack DeCour dated Kaylee. He's all over that house. Jack DeCour's DNA, he could, I don't even want to get rude. There's fluids of Jack DeCour in that house probably that link him 6 ways from Sunday. There you go. Let's just say that. Jack DeCour's DNA is in that freaking house. To say that he gave his DNA and he's been ruled out because his DNA wasn't in the house is complete and utter horseshit. Again, these are all allegedly text messages. Those cameras also show him entering the house and going to bed. Here he's talking about Jack DeCour. Steve Gonzalez, we know from interviews, Steve Gonzalez and the Gonzalez family suspected Jack DeCour at some point, but they were told Jack DeCour's alibi checks out. He went to bed that night. We know his alibi checked out. We saw him go into the house. And so he will say, cameras show Jack DeCour went home that night. Let's continue. And here's Steve, and many of you know about this statement. I've never seen it verbally or be written out, but here it is. Steve Gonzalez admitted himself, if this is his text messages, he, Jack DeCour, could get to their house where Kaylee Gonzalez was at without being on camera, or at least not very easily. So Steve Gonzalez said, we were told Jack was ruled out. He gave his DNA and he passed a lie detector test, and the camera shows him going home. However, I have to admit, Jack DeCour could get back to 1122 King Road residence where Kaylee was at without getting caught on camera. It's interesting that Steve Gonzalez would even fucking point that out. Why is he pointing that out? Because I would say he still suspects there's a possibility Jack DeCour was involved. Because he's like, technically, Jack DeCour still could go back to that house and not be on camera. So that's it. Think about this. If law enforcement said Jack DeCour has an alibi, we saw him go into his house, end of story. He was there for the night. We saw him go into the house and we never saw him come back on camera. Even Steve Gonzalez says there is a way for Jack DeCour to have gone to the 1122 King Road residence without getting on camera. Jack DeCour knows that. Did the police know that? Is Ann Taylor going to expose that on the witness thing? Is she going to say, hey, by the way, law enforcement, you ruled out people. Did you, did you happen to point out that somebody could actually go from this address here to that address there without being seen on camera? Will she do that? I don't know. BK, Brian Kohberger, is toast over the cast data, the cell phone traces that the grand jury members said. Here's where I want you to use your critical thinking skills. If this is a legitimate conversation between Steve Gonzalez and somebody, he's being told, according to the grand jury, Brian Kohberger is toast because the cell phone data proves that he was in and around the house at that time. Here's the problem with that. Grand juries do not have the defense during that whole investigation. The convening of the grand jury is done outside of the presence of the defense. No Cy Ray was in the courtroom talking to the grand jury, presenting alternate evidence showing that the FBI manipulated the cell phone data to place Brian Kohberger somewhere that he wasn't. So based on a very, very one-sided argument by the prosecution with manipulated data, according to Ann Taylor, very manipulated data, and Cy Ray, who's always came out in support of the prosecution. For the first time in his entire career, Cy Ray is coming out in support of a defendant saying, that's horseshit, they manipulated data. That is not how it happened. I'll guarantee you. I'm the expert. I wrote the book on how to track people with cell phones. And I'm telling you, the FBI is lying about Brian Koberger's location. And Hippler doesn't want Cy Ray coming on to the stand. Hippler referred to Cy Ray as a conspiracy theorist. He literally wrote the book on it. He teaches law enforcement. Most of law enforcement in this case actually learned from Cy Ray how to track cell phones. And yet Hippler calls him a conspiracy theorist because for the first time in his life, Cy Ray is saying, I know how cell phones work. I wrote the manual. I taught your FBI agents how to track cell phones, and they're manipulating data. It didn't happen that way. So going back to what Steve Gonzalez is saying, the grand jury said, yeah, he's toast. The cell phone data puts Brian Koberger at the scene, and it's a one-sided argument. The grand jury only gets to see the prosecution case. They don't get to see a Cy Ray. Maybe we won't get to see the Cy Ray as well, because if Hippler has his way, he doesn't. Again, Hippler's statement in this whole case, in my opinion, I'm using tongue-in-cheek rhetoric, is only Brian Koberger is allowed to be guilty. All right, let's continue on. Shit, I'm behind schedule. They said that they shouldn't have even called them as witnesses. Let's go back up. Shit, can I back up? Yeah. All right, here we go. Again, we don't have half the conversation. They said, grand jury, in my opinion, they said Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk. That I'm reading between the lines for you because I figured out what this conversation is saying, in my opinion. The grand jury said, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk shouldn't have even been called as witnesses. They didn't help at all. I agree. Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk, created more questions than answers. No shit. So according to, again, if this is indeed Steve Gonzalez's conversation, even the grand jury said Dylan Mortensen should have never been put on the fucking stand. Bethany Funk shouldn't have been put on the stand. They only created more problems. They're putting in reasonable doubt into the jury's heads. They talked the whole time that the shit was going down by text. Steve Gonzalez is telling us what we all know by now. The girls, Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk, were on their phones texting during the murders, after the murders, for hours after the murders, before anybody called 911. And that sat really poorly with the grand jury, according to Steve Gonzalez. The grand jury had a real problem with Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk and their story and the way that those girls were talking and texting during the commission of the crimes. And that didn't sit well with the jurors, according to this supposed discussion by Steve Gonzalez. I'm out of time. Shit. Murphy, the dog, was barking and growling for about 10 minutes, and then he stops when the white car takes off. This is basically a collaboration, or collaborating the idea that the killings took place in the course of about 10 minutes, about maybe 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. Murphy's going nuts. They say they got it on camera. They can hear Murphy going nuts, and it stops when the white car takes off because the killer allegedly, or killers, has left the scene. We know about James Leonard. We talked about his girlfriend when he was still in jail. We're going to skip that for his brevity here. If it wasn't for the FBI, we would still be looking. They figured out who he was for the cops. That's the FBI figured out who Brian Koberger was for the cops because the cops couldn't figure it out on their own. The FBI gave them Brian Koberger's name. Then he talks about this timestamp, and he shows the girls getting dropped off at 1:56 a.m. No one's getting killed at 1:56 a.m. So Steve Gonzalez shows a picture, allegedly, that shows the girls in a very clear resolution picture being dropped off at 1122 King Road residence at 1:56 a.m. because there's some speculation that the murders happened somewhere around that 1:56 time frame. And so Steve Gonzalez allegedly, and this is saying, there's no way the killings took place at 1:56. You can see the girls getting dropped off at 1:56. That's not when the killings happened. Something was going down on that audio from Linda Lane. It just wasn't at 1122 King Road. So again, I'm running out of time, but what Steve says is, yes, there's Linda Lane footage. We hear some commotion. Many people on the internet are pointing out that the Linda Lane footage is something happening at 1122 King Road residence. What Steve Gonzalez will say is that camera was 100 yards away, a football field's length away. It did not pick up anything from 1122 King Road residence. And what Steve will say, cutting to the chase because we're out of time, is that that I'm certain something was happening. You do hear something happening on the 112, you do hear on the Linda Lane footage, you do hear something happening, but it wasn't what was happening at 1122 King Road residence. So he was basically saying, all you people out there breaking down the audio saying, this is sounds that you can hear from next door, that was supposedly is a football field away. And Steve Gonzalez talks about having cameras that are 40 feet away that he could listen to. And Steve Gonzalez says that on the cameras that are 40 feet away, you hear none of that shit. So it's a completely different incident happening. It's not happening at 1122 King, according to this. And again, this is all if this is true. Now, again, I'm out of time to do this in an hour and get there. I'm going to try to see if I can skip through. He talks here about the odd thing is that there, Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk's story is mixed with two different events. So the jurors didn't like that. No shit. Guess who he talks about right here? Kopacka. That made my list. I think it's number 5 on my list of alternative suspects. Brent Kopacka. Kopacka is 36. We don't know what was said before that, but Steve Gonzalez allegedly is responding. Kopacka is 36. He goes on to say in the next sentence, my girls would want nothing to do with any old school loser who wanted to hang out with girls 16 years younger. But what it tells you is that Steve Gonzalez was well aware of the name Brent Kopacka in relation to the murders. So all the people who say I'm completely an asshole for bringing up Brent Kopacka's name was on Steve Gonzalez's mind. People brought it up to Steve Gonzalez. He says that there's no way my girls would have been involved with a 36-year-old man, so he can't be involved. That's his logic for why Brent Kopacka couldn't have been in the house that night or couldn't have been part of the killing, because his girls wouldn't have been hanging out with a 36-year-old man. Who says he was hanging out with them? So I don't have time to finish. If you haven't seen this video, you can kind of see it on the screen. Look up Sonia Lee. You can barely see it. Steve Gonzalez solo leaked messages, and it all flows. That's the name of the YouTube video. You can check it out in its entirety. I downloaded it for posterity's sake because I feel that this video is going to get scrubbed pretty soon. That shit's coming down. Whether or not it really is Steve Gonzalez, I don't know. That's for you to decide. I want to now spend a little bit of time, about 4 or 5 minutes, getting questions from the audience. I'm so sorry that I have missed a bunch of your questions. So I'm going to start watching from right here, Circus Music and down. So Circus Music, I'm watching you. And now I'm saying anybody after that, I want to see what you've got for questions. If you've already asked a question above, I'm only looking below Circus Music on the screen right now. Give me some new information. Maybe somebody can tell me if there was a question that you think I should have addressed. Thank you for my wife giving you the Discord channel, because when we get done here in about 5 minutes, we're going to shut down. I'm going to take a quick potty break and a drink, refill my drink, and then I'm going to fire up the Backstage account on Discord where we talk real bluntly and I drop more F-bombs that I'm trying to be good about. I'm looking for something I want to put on screen. There's lots of comments here. Nothing that I'm raising to the attention of putting on screen at the moment. Any last minute questions, comments, concerns? Is Murder Metal Mayhem in the room right now? He was going to join us on the After Dark party, so hopefully he's there. Pete Alteri and I did a show last night. Shit, my days run together. Pete Alteri from Murder. God damn it, man. I don't know why I slaughter your show's name. Good Lord. Pete, so sorry. Pete Alteri from Murder Metal Mayhem. The two of us do this mashup called Devil's Mayhem. Devil's Advocates Murder Metal Mayhem. So he's going to join us in the house on the After Dark party where we have a few drinks. I've already started. We're going to have a few drinks. We're going to get loose. We're going to talk on the Discord channel. So hopefully he's in. Anything else? Let me pin this. Well, I mean, Rhonda's already Rhonda's posting what already was in the scrolling. In fact, let me put it on the scroll again. If it's, I guess it already is scrolling across the bottom as well. Look how the link is slightly different. Discord will give you 5 different links for the same thing. It should take you to the channel. If you never used Discord before, Discord has a text channel called General. It also has voice channels with a little microphone or a little speakerphone. And there's a voice channel called After Dark. that's the channel you want to be in so you can hear the audio. I will also be streaming it on our Backstage account, Devil's Advocates Backstage, where you can hear audio only. We've been having a problem lately with people texting on YouTube and having us be able to see that text in the room. So we're trying to work out the technical difficulties on that, which is not a great thing if I've been having a few drinks to probably work out technical difficulties. Let's continue to see if I have any last minute comments. Any guess as to what the 5-day court hearing scheduled for the end of July is about? Well, I don't know about a scheduled hearing for the end of July, but we do know that jury selection is starting August 4th, I believe. So it's probably, so yes, I have a guess. It's probably going over the rules of voir dire. So the Judge Hippler will talk about voir dire process. He'll talk about how people are going to be excluded on the voir dire process. As the jurors come forward, he'll talk about what questions are going to be asked to the juror, what questions and answers the defense and the prosecution can ask, and how people will be eliminated. So I'm guessing that lines up perfectly with the process leading into voir dire process, which is the jury selection process that starts August 4th, trial to start August 18th now. Great question. Lots of stuff in the comments about Brent Kopacka. I've got many videos. I feel, okay, I've got 4 or 5 long form videos about Brent Kopacka. If you're interested, every time I bring up Brent Kopacka's name, somebody kicks me in the balls for mentioning it. I get it. I understand why you don't like to talk about Brent Kopacka. But if you want to hear my thoughts on Brent Kopacka, I've got videos, one of which you might want to watch is called The Horror Movie Theory. I know that sounds like a weird title. Watch The Horror Movie Theater if you want to get some of my early thoughts on Brent Kopacka. I agree, Erica. 5 days closed is too long for voir dire. I agree. That's a long time. They probably could handle the voir dire instructions in 1 day. So that's why I said it's a guess that that's what it is. I agree. That's too long for just the rules about voir dire. By the way, did you know that 6 individuals from Pennsylvania were meeting in a couple days, I think on June 30th. I think it's 5 or 6 individuals from Pennsylvania, including a guard and a former classmate of Brian Koberger's, and 5 other individuals, I think, are being brought into court in Pennsylvania to see if they need to be subpoenaed to come to Idaho to testify in the case. What we don't know at this point is whether or not they're going to be subpoenaed on behalf of the prosecution or the defense. But I think it's a total of 6 individuals or 7 individuals. I think it's 7. I think it's 2 individuals. One's a prison guard, one's a former classmate of Brian Koberger's, and then there's 5 others. I think it's a total of 7. They'll be seen, I believe, in 3 days in Pennsylvania. So on Monday, is that what it's going to be? Monday in Pennsylvania to determine whether they're going to be subpoenaed in the Idaho case. All right, folks, I'm already behind the schedule. Thank you all for coming. It was a great show. I've been complaining lately that my shows have been so small. Some are, under 50 people. Last time we had 166. This time we had 130 something. Awesome that you guys are showing up. So sorry for those who wanted to see Birdie and I riff a little bit tonight because, again, Birdie had some last minute things come up, personal business. I 100% believe there's nothing. Birdie's not bailing out on Lee because Lee's not important enough, despite me making the joke about somebody find a better date for the night than me, so they picked a different guy. That's not what happened. Thank you all for coming, and hopefully before you leave, don't forget, if you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe and follow the Devil's Advocates. I believe I've got a lot of really good stuff. I'm going to be at the court for Brian Koberger every day of that trial if I can. I'm going to be doing a lot of great stuff. I've got attorneys, more than one, I think, attorney on the back burner to come talk to me about that case and give legal opinions about what's happening in the case. So I think I've got a lot to offer you if you like rants. If you don't like rants or somebody yelling, then I'm probably not your guy, and I'm totally okay with that. Find somebody who's a little slower and not on crack cocaine or going 1,000 miles an hour because he's got too much caffeine. By the way, I'm not on crack cocaine. I don't do drugs. But the point being is that check me out, like, subscribe, notification bell, all that shit. Consider becoming a member, by the way, of the Imps Club. If you want behind the scenes stuff, I do a lot of member only content for extra, and you also can, at the next level up, get look aheads for videos that are scheduled. I'm busy. lots of shit. So if you always want to see what's coming up, check that out. Otherwise, everyone have a good night. Thank you so much. Sorry I didn't get to all your questions. See you next time.